Welcome to the TravelPulse podcast. Here's your host, Mark Murphy.
Hi, it's Mark Murphy back with the TravelPulse podcast. I didn't connect with you last week because I was too busy. I was running around. I hit Milwaukee. I hit Chicago. I ended up down in Cancun, Riviera Maya area, just south of the airport. Did a 4-night, 5-day company meeting and had the best of intentions to get out a podcast. Did not happen. So the good news is I got more information for you this week. We're going to cover a host of things, including some of my feedback from my trip to Mexico based on what the mainstream media is talking about in regards to the safety of travel to Mexico, because that's a first-hand perspective from not just me, but another 45 individuals who actually work in my company. So that's actually pretty important. The other thing is we're going to get into some of the travel news. What's weird this week is some travel news that just popped up isn't really news because something happened 5 years ago. We'll touch on that. And, don't swim with sharks if they haven't been fed. We'll cover some travel tips. We'll cover some politics and how politics are impacting one of the places I visited that I think is fantastic and how it makes it a lot more affordable. And last and certainly not least, I'm going to give you some money-saving ideas to take advantage of travel this fall and the Great White North. So and the islands. So it's kind of an interesting mix. But anyway, with that said, let's talk Mexico for a second. I keep hearing people telling me that they're afraid to travel to Mexico. And I think that is basically twofold. Number one, it's paranoia. Number two, well, it's more than twofold. It's a little bit of paranoia brought on by the media. It's certainly being uninformed. And it's also tied to the fact that when you look at a foreign locale versus where you live, for instance, you're more concerned about news that's happening in that foreign destination, even if it's a fraction of what's happening literally in your own hometown. Case in point, earlier this week I was in Chicago. Again, a bunch of shootings over the weekend. Again, people killed, lots of people shot. I think over the weekend it was a couple of dozen that were shot, 2 that were killed over the weekend. The weekend before, it was dozens of people shot. Yet, I went to Chicago. I didn't think twice about it. Maybe it's because it's my hometown. It's where I was born and raised for that entire 12 months of my formative years as a baby because I left in diapers. But I've been back a bunch of times. And I got to tell you, I think Chicago is an amazing city. It has a huge crime problem. But you don't go to those crime-ridden areas unless you want to buy drugs when you're there. And so it's not a factor in my thinking. Now, if you applied that same logic to Mexico, you'd have no problem going to Mexico. Yet, when I talked to folks, and I grabbed a couple of people on the plane and said, hey, man, weren't you afraid to travel to Mexico? And one of them was a couple with 2 young kids. They were like, no, it's great. We had no worries. We know that's a bunch of crap, and it's really blown out of proportion. But then the lady next to me on the flight back, who went down as a single woman and met up with other people, she said that everybody in her family thought she was crazy to be going because of all the negative news. And again, she works in communications. Her name was Susan, and she certainly understood that what she was hearing wasn't really accurate as to what's going on the ground, despite the fact that she hadn't been to Mexico in a number of years. And then a couple across the row from me was on their way back from a great vacation, and they live in, the suburbs of Philadelphia, and they were laughing and saying, you know what, Philadelphia is more dangerous than Mexico. If people would just come down, they would understand that. And I couldn't agree more. The bottom line is I have been now to Mexico. I may be off by one trip, but 7 times this year, and I've never had an issue. I've been, dozens and dozens of times. And in fact, the reason I was down in Cancun was I took 46 people from my company there for a company meeting. Now, think about that. If Mexico was so damn dangerous, and I've got my finger literally on the pulse of what's going on in travel, unless I have a desire to have all of my employees, booked on one-way tickets, then why would I put them, quote, in harm's way? And the reality is I didn't. I took them to a safe destination, stayed at a beautiful resort called Breathless, 10 miles south of Cancun Airport, about a 20-minute hop from the airport. We had private transfer set up. We showed up at the resort. We had action-packed days of training, of team building, etc., and just an overall fantastic experience. And the same was true for the other folks that were on board the flight coming back, that I basically inserted myself into the conversation. I was like a walk-in focus group moderator. I wanted to know why they went, what they thought, and to a T, they all said they ignored the warnings. They realized it was safe. They've talked to other people who have been, and the ones who seemed to be the most hyped up about it, they told me, were the ones who have never been. So to them, it was just really foreign. So back to the Chicago example, you're comfortable living in Chicago, you're comfortable in New York, you're comfortable in Philadelphia for the most part, but you're not comfortable going to Mexico. It's only because it is foreign in the sense of you can't relate, and you're a little unsure because you just don't know the language, you don't know the customs, you've never been there. Rest assured, companies would not be taking American travelers there if there was an issue. Now, that leads us to the State Department travel warnings. Just a quick update. If you go to the State Department travel warnings, you can Google Mexico travel warning, State Department, or State Department, Mexico travel warning, whatever you want. You'll find out that there's a travel warning on Mexico. But that's an overall travel warning. But when you drill into it, you'll notice that in July, they updated it and said the tourist areas are safe for American travelers. Mexico, believe it or not, is a huge country, geographically really dispersed. And that means that, yes, there are places in Mexico you'd stay away from. Just like there are places in Chicago you would not go, again, unless you're looking to score drugs. And so the reality on the ground is very different than what you're hearing. I want to reemphasize that so you understand that. And if you are interested in traveling there, have the confidence to go and enjoy yourself because, again, unless something really random happens, you are going to have an amazing trip and you're going to be totally safe. But then again, I could go out today from my office in New Jersey where I'm sitting right now, and someone could rear end my car and I could be injured. Or, something else could happen. I mean, the world, we don't live in a bubble. But again, I felt that I was much safer in Mexico at this Breathless resort than I am driving into Philadelphia to do a TV segment, for instance, or going up to New York. Just the reality of it, folks. But anyway, don't want to spend too much time on that because there is some travel news this week. But one of the items for travel news kind of has me shaking my head. So it popped up that this pilot made Taylor Swift his emergency contact. And when you read the headline, and you think, oh my gosh, before he crashed his plane, FYI, and ended up dying in the plane crash. When you go to read the story and you wonder why you haven't heard about this plane crash outside of Nashville, where the pilot circled for 2 hours, was drunk, and then basically crashed his plane in bad weather and died without ever reaching out to air traffic control, etc. You start reading it and you realize that the actual crash took place in 2013. And the reason it's news as of a few days ago is because, guess what? They just disclosed that Taylor Swift was his emergency contact. Hey, folks, that is a freaking reach. How the hell is that news? Travel news? Are you kidding me? But there are some outlets that picked it up and said it's travel news. And there's also some outlets out there that don't do a lick of travel news, but some third-party portals, etc., will call their content travel news. Which is, and even Google does it too. It's kind of funny. When you see some of these brands that don't do travel news, they come up under travel news on Google. Go take a look, click in, and you tell me what you see. It doesn't make any sense, but again, not social, but search engines are not that great at helping you sort things out. And that's why I always recommend, if you're thinking about travel, call a travel agent. If you don't know one, message me. I'm at Murphy Travels on all my social media. You send me a direct message, I'm going to respond. I'll connect you up with a great travel agent because guess what? if you do a search and you try to dig through all the junk that's out there, you're going to get frustrated at best case. Worst case is you're going to go ahead and book something. You're not going to realize what the hell it is you actually booked. And then you're going to ask yourself, man, did I screw up? What did I do here? Because the trip you thought you booked didn't turn out to meet the expectations of what you wanted. Now, I can guarantee that the Instagram model that was in the Bahamas in July, who was doing a photo shoot and decided that she was going to swim with the sharks to create this really cool Instagram photo shoot because she had, quote, seen other people do this in the same spot, unquote. Yeah, it didn't work out that way for her because the nurse shark, decided to bite her and grabbed onto her arm. And my dad used to tell me that just because somebody else thinks something's a good idea doesn't exactly mean you should be doing that. Case in point, I always used to get if somebody told you to jump off a bridge, would you do it? And, it's kind of the old school. He was part of the greatest generation, and he didn't have much encouragement, but he certainly knew when to say, don't be an idiot. And he would love today's world of just people doing really stupid things, the whole jackass stuff, people deciding to push the extremes, or they want to get that perfect selfie picture and then they self-implode because they fall off the damn cliff and die. Maybe the photo turned out. Hell, if it was on one of those, video, if it was doing like a video clip as opposed to just a selfie picture, it would even be better because they would go out by going viral with their last travel video. But it's just dumb stuff. When I was in Tahiti, I swam with sharks. I think they were reef sharks, if I recall, in Bora Bora. And you'd go out on a boat, but they would feed the damn sharks. And the sharks would get fed. You would get on, you get on the boat and be out there, and they'd be fat, dumb, and happy, and they would just cruise around. They wouldn't bother you. And I don't recall seeing anything where a person swimming with sharks in Bora Bora has ever been attacked, but I haven't done a search for that, so I have no idea. But I don't recall, and we would cover something like that on TravelPulse. But with that said, they were fed. And so I'm assuming the nurse sharks weren't fed, and that's why they wanted to take a bite out of this lady's arm. She's totally fine, but again, it's about common sense. Maybe if she booked with a travel agent, they would have told her, don't do me a favor. Don't swim with sharks unless they've been fed, and here's a waiver in case you decide to do it, so I'm not liable. That might make you think twice. I don't know, just a thought. So Tahiti, on the other hand, the thing I didn't like was when the damn guide who was driving our boat thought it was funny as I'm standing there in the water in about 5 feet of water, he decided to take a piece of, bait, dead fish, slap it on my chest because then the stingrays just swarmed me like a bat flying onto me. And if you know how their mouths are, it's like a suction cup and the thing's just like sucking on my chest trying to eat the damn fish. That was creepy as hell. Not enjoyable, but, it is what it is. So I thought it was okay after the fact. I don't think I was too thrilled while I was doing it, though, man. But if you're ever out in Bora Bora, mark it on your calendar. It's a bucket list trip and definitely fun and a cool experience. But stay away from the dude with the bait. That would be my suggestion. Now, one of the things we like to touch on with our podcast here is we like to give you some insights into social media and some of the knuckleheads that are out there because they make for entertainment. This week, it's going to be a little different. In terms of social media and travel, basically, we could say social media and travel because guess what? A big part of social media is people sharing their travel experiences and bragging rights, et cetera, and telling you how cool their vacation is, et cetera. But we should actually call this topic, how to get your home robbed while you're on vacation. Now, if you are out sharing all your adventures on social media and you've got an empty house at home, I guarantee you thieves who have access to your social media, and trust me, they have it unless it's locked down like a fortress, but I guarantee most of you don't have it locked down like a fortress. And even if you did, there's so many ways to get at your personal information, it's almost impossible to remain private. There literally is no privacy today. So if you're going to be sharing things on social media, my suggestion is to think about the old school where you went and took the photos, you came back, you did the album, and then you sat down and went through it, with your family and the people, your neighbors, and they went into a coma. Yeah. It's better on social media. It's more fun to kind of see it up there and just scan through it as opposed to having somebody sit down and walk you through it. But if you take that first part of creating it after the fact, then you can still put it up on social media and roll out the pictures and share your experience. But now you're home. Now you're not doing it while you're traveling, and you're not letting everybody in the world know that you're somewhere else. So, hey, man, come on in, the stealing's good here at Murphy World Headquarters while I'm in, God only knows, or like last week it was Cancun. Try not to do that. And if you do it, make sure you got a really good alarm system or neighborhood watch or somebody house sitting for you so that they see that there are lights on and people and there's activity, because otherwise you could be a target. Remember, most homes get robbed while people are away, which is a good thing, but don't make it easier for them to know you're away. Try to fake them out. Just as a side note, one of the products I like is that Hue product with all the different colored lights and how you can schedule things, the Internet of Things, and being able to put things on timers, et cetera. I think that goes a long way in fooling people to thinking someone's home, unless they're really watching your house. Then you're kind of out of luck. Doesn't matter what light show you got going on. But anyway, that's a little bit of a travel tip as far as social media goes. And there's a few others. I'll just give you one more. We came back from Cancun, and I lost an hour of my freaking life because the people I was driving back with don't have global entry. And oh my God, global entry! It is such a godsend. When you pay $85 for global entry, here's how it works. You apply online. Just look it up online. Just do a search, global entry application. Fill it out. It's $85, and that's if you get approved. It lasts 5 years, and it covers you for TSA PreCheck as well as immigration when you come in from outside the country. In a nutshell, I got off a plane, and 6 minutes later, I had cleared customs and immigration and was ready to leave. The folks who were traveling with me, who were going to be my ride, because I thought I'd save a few bucks, dumb move on my part, because those few dollars I saved cost me an hour of my life I will never get back, because it took them well over an hour to get through immigration, to get their bag, to get out of customs. And I was in the rapid line. And I can't believe more of you don't use global entry. Global entry is a no-brainer. It's less than $20 a year. You just sign up and you get literally out the door in minutes. And then when you go to board a plane, when you go through security and TSA, no matter what flight you're on, domestic or international, most of the time, if you're approved for global entry, you get TSA PreCheck, meaning that line where you don't take off your freaking shoes, you don't take anything out of your bag, you don't have to take your little travel bag of toiletries. You don't take any of that crap out. You can even leave a jacket on. All you get rid of is your wallet, your phone. You keep your belt on. I mean, no stripping at the freaking TSA. That's a beautiful thing. Last podcast, I told you how annoying it is when I don't get it. But man, do I love it when I do get it. And so $85, do the application online, lasts for 5 years, and guess what? The beauty of it is rapid entry into the country, rapid entry through security on any flight. And even if you only fly 2 or 3 times a year, well worth it. It'll take an hour of your life to schedule an appointment, to go in. You'll get fingerprinted. They'll run a background check. They'll interview you. Unless you've got some criminal freaking record, you should be good to go. If you do have a criminal record, ignore everything you just freaking heard, okay? And try to stay out of jail. But with that said, it's a no-brainer, absolute no-brainer. Now, speaking of global entry and international travel, I've been watching the politics taking place between Turkey and the U.S., and you keep hearing about this tariff stuff, et cetera, Chinese tariffs, renegotiating NAFTA, whatever. That's all fine and well. what's really standing out to me this week is how the Turkish lira, their currency, has cratered, literally cratered, under the pressure being exerted by the U.S. when it comes to trade and other things that are going on. And the reason it's political is because, in my personal opinion, they're putting pressure on Erdogan, who's the leader of Turkey, because he is still holding an American pastor there in Turkey because, of this speaking out, etc., and they're not releasing him. And so the U.S. government's putting pressure on Turkey and Erdogan specifically by literally cratering their currency with tariff threats. And they're imposing these tariffs, not just threats. Now, that means that if you've ever thought about going to an amazing city like Istanbul, which I've traveled to, now would be the time to go. It is an unbelievable destination and just a fantastic place to explore. And what you're going to find is the price point to go there is dirt cheap. The most expensive thing you're going to do is fly there. And I got to tell you, Turkish Airlines is one of the best values in the air these days. And I've flown them, and my staff has flown them, even when their endpoint is not Istanbul. They'll fly nonstop to Istanbul, let's say from the New York area, and then they'll connect and fly up to Western Europe, for instance. But the value of going through Istanbul is amazing. And if you are thinking about going somewhere else, check out the flights on Turkish Airlines or have a travel agent do it for you, because they'll find you a great fare. And then you could even do a 2 or 3 night stopover on your way to wherever your business might be in Europe. And if you do that, you're going to have a great experience. You're going to have a really value-packed experience in terms of the cost on the ground. And you're going to save money on your airfare on top to your final destination. I mean, it's a win-win-win all the way around. And my other suggestion would be work with an agent to do the trip and make sure that that agent gets you a guide on the ground, a private guide, which sounds really expensive, but given the value of the dollar versus the lira, it is very, very cheap. And you would have a native speaker, you would have an insider who would give you great insights, and they would basically be able to fast track you and take you to all the things you want to see and give you really great insights. It's exactly how I experienced the destination, and I encourage you to do the same. And that would be a visit to Turkey. So just great value. And there's other great values. And what people don't understand is even when there's not like a currency issue like we're seeing with Turkey, the time of year which is upon us right now, which is the fall, is one of the best times of all year to travel. And I'll give you a couple examples today. So I know that, well, let me back up. Shoulder season. You may have heard me use that term on a segment I did with Windy City Live last week. But shoulder season is a term we use in the travel industry to talk about, great deals. It's off season. People have gone back to work. Summer travel is over. We know that Europeans travel like crazy in the summer, and they have lots of vacation that they eat up. Well, Americans get a couple of weeks, and if they haven't used it in the summer, and they don't have to worry about kids in school, et cetera, or the couple just wants to get away while the kids go back to school, you probably cannot beat the fall selling season in terms of booking trips. And here's just one example. If you wanted to go and let's say you've never taken a cruise, here's a really cool way to experience a fantastic product that I've been on, and do it as a sampler. You would fly to Seattle, and Seattle's a great city. I would go to Seattle. I'd spend a couple nights in Seattle and enjoy that great city. Then I would turn around and get on the Eurodam on September 29th, and it leaves from Seattle, and it's a 2-night sailing that stops in Vancouver on the 1st of October. The cost per person to take that trip, not including, port charges and any kind of gratuities, which would be very small, is $99 per person. Think about that. It's under $50 per night for 2 nights. That covers all of your food. That covers your accommodations. It's obviously based on double occupancy. So it'd be $200 per day. I'm sorry, I'm messing up. $99 total, $200 in total, $100 per day to enjoy that experience. And then I would bookend it with a couple of nights in one of my favorite cities in the world, Vancouver. So you get two fantastic cities on each end. You get a cruise sampler in between just to give you the feel for a cruise. You don't really have to worry about getting seasick because you're going up in a protected area, so you're not going to have to deal with rough seas, etc. And you're going to get a flare. And it's with Holland America Line, and it's on their Eurodam. And it's a really great product. So I would certainly check that out. Now, let's imagine if you wanted to do something a little more, I would say, a little more variety and a long trip. So if you're retired or you could take a lot of free time, that sailing that starts on September 29th with Holland America's Eurodam, it goes to October 17th. It's an 18-day trip that starts in Seattle, does that same stop in Vancouver, and then heads out towards Hawaii. And you're at sea for 4.5, 5 days on each end of it. And then you're in Hawaii for, I believe, you have to check the itinerary at the Holland America site or through your travel agent. And it's about 5 or 6 nights in Hawaii. Total of 18 days, an inside stateroom per person, under $1,500. So think about that. 18 days, under $1,500. It's less than $100 per person per day. You get to experience Hawaii. And believe it or not, those sea days where all you see is the horizon, you never see land, they are some of the most relaxing days you will ever have, as long as you have good weather. And I would think you'd have pretty good weather still that time of year because it's still early enough in the season. And so, interesting enough, those types of trips, they would cost double, in some cases triple that amount should they occur during high season. This is why this time of year is fantastic for travel. I'm going to give you one more Holland America example. It's coming up fast. It's the September 1st departure, and it goes up to, Ketchikan and Juneau. It's a 7-night Alaska voyage, and it's round trip out of Seattle. You can get an inside stateroom for $7.99 per person. The weather is still great. It hasn't turned yet in Alaska, although bear in mind you're going through a rainforest. So when people say, I went to Alaska and it rained the whole time, I don't care what time of year you go, that can happen on any week. People don't realize that can happen constantly. So think about if you've ever thought about taking a cruise and you just want to sample it. You got a 2-day example, $99 per person for 2 nights. You could do that, Seattle to Vancouver. If you wanted to bite off and just take a great value experience, go for the 18-day Circle Hawaii. You're going to hit Seattle and Vancouver. I would do a pre or post in Seattle. Check out Vancouver because you'll be on the ground there. I think it also hits Victoria as it leaves, and then it ends up going across the ocean to Hawaii, and then spend 5 to 6 nights in Hawaii, and then come back. You hit all the main islands, and then you come back, and again 5 nights or so at sea before returning to Seattle. Fantastic itinerary, fantastic experience. Can't argue with it. Got to check that out. And then the last one is just if you have a limited amount of time and you want a great value to go visit to visit Alaska, you got to look at the Eurodam September 1st sailing. And I would try to go as early as possible in September to have the highest likelihood you're going to get the best possible weather, because the weather there turns pretty quickly. But again, be forewarned, because forewarned is that weather can be rainy as hell for the entire week, no matter when you go up there, and you got to manage expectations. And the thing that I would do is I would make sure I would fly, get in a helicopter, and spend some of the money you're saving on the cruise by doing a Mendenhall glacier trek where they fly you up on a helicopter. They give you a helicopter tour. They land on the actual glacier and you get out and walk on it, which is really cool. And then the second thing I would look at, the dog sledding, which is phenomenal. So those would be 2 really cool experiences that you should check out. And great values all around. So this fall, those are some of the ideas. I will be back next week with more travel ideas, tips, advice, and I'm sure politics will enter into it once again. And maybe we can get back on to some of the wacky social media stuff that always keeps it entertaining and interesting. Until then, I'm Mark Murphy. This is the Travel Pulse Podcast.